Good night and welcome to the Living Well show, where we have holistic conversations that inspire healing, hope, and transformation. With your hosts, Dr. Albert and Shanique Tompkins. Pleasant good evening, everyone. I am Shanique,
Good night. I am Dr. Albert.
and we thank you for joining us for another week of the Living Well show. This is World AIDS Month, or it was World AIDS Day earlier in the month. And tonight we have an exciting topic lined up. So, Doc, go ahead and introduce our guest.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, yes, December the 1st was World AIDS Day, and the theme was ending the HIV epidemic, equitable access, everyone's voice. And so here at the Living Well show, we wanted to add voice of our community to the conversation. So today we'll be talking about it's not over, how to live with HIV AIDS. And we have a great guest in the person of Dr. Ratonia Runnels, who's going to help us today. So Dr. Ratonia Runnels is a tenured faculty in the School of Social Work, Psychology, and Philosophy at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas. She's also the Grace Project Program Coordinator at Legacy Cares, formerly known as Legacy Counseling Center in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Reynolds has over 25 years of experience promoting healthy living and positive lifestyle choices among women and girls living with HIV. Her research focuses on mental health and support services for women living with HIV. Her background includes community outreach, substance abuse, counseling, case management, professional training, and consulting for state and federal offices, presenting at national and international conferences, and she has published scholarly works in scientific journals. Dr. Reynolds has been living with HIV since 1997, and as a scholar, mentor, community worker, her message is one of hope and healing that promises to inspire and revolutionize how we perceive obstacles and diseases. So, good evening, Dr. Reynolds, and welcome to the Living Well show. Go ahead and greet the people.
Thank you, Dr. Tompkins, and thank you, Shanique, for having me this evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm coming to you live from my office here at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas, and I'm so excited to be on the Living Well show. Good evening.
All right. We're so happy to have you. And right. And
Welcome.
we're excited to hear what you got to say because it's such an important topic, especially to our community.
Mhm.
And we thank God for this platform that we can help give voice to this particular area. So
Mhm.
let's jump right in here and want to know about your journey, in terms of promoting healthy living and lifestyles for women with HIVs. Tell us about their journey, please.
Okay. Well, as you stated it in my bio, I've been living with HIV for 25 years now, or
Wow.
almost 25 years. And at the time when I was diagnosed, I was an undergraduate at the University of Texas.
Okay.
And up until that point, HIV and AIDS was still something that's very taboo,
Mm,
lots of stigma, not too different from today. Things look very different, but it was during the time when people were still being diagnosed and then dying very quickly. So that whole atmosphere was surrounded by fear and a lot of discrimination.
mm,
And so, as me in my little community where I'm from Dallas, but you know the people in your family, the people you go to school with, and the people you go to church with,
mm.
and that's your circle, that's your community. And there wasn't any person or discussion or anything like that in my community. The only person that I knew of personally was a friend. He was older, but we grew up together in church,
Okay.
and he was also gay. And the church responded to him like most churches respond to gay
Mm,
people. And so when he passed away, it was a real sad time, but also a not really discussed time because he had, the disease. And
right.
so for me, being 20 years old and not having any place to reach out to or any person to talk to or get answers from or anything like that. I sought those answers myself,
Mm.
and took a class as an elective in social work and sexuality because that was the only thing that I could connect to in any way to understand what was happening, what was going on. And that class introduced me to Planned Parenthood and the services that they provide. And I
Mm.
started volunteering at a Planned Parenthood in their education department. And so, in volunteering at the Planned Parenthood, I was able to educate myself and also meet other people who were working in the field and helping to support and educate and do outreach and things like that. So that's how I got started, volunteering at Planned Parenthood in the education center and doing outreach. And that work led to a position as a health specialist with the city health department. And it just progressed from there in terms of doing community outreach, working with groups, educating women, doing education in churches. All of that was in the very beginning,
Okay.
and was the foundation of what's happening right now.
Wow. What a journey. What a journey.
Yes, and so you mentioned this was almost 25 years ago, and it
Mhm.
was still very much taboo
Mhm.
during the 90s. So, what were some of the obstacles you would say you faced then, and what have you seen that has changed today from then?
One obstacle that I know that I faced was stigma,
Mm.
and just a fear of rejection. People know your secret, because there was still a lot of fear. The obstacle of stigma still exists today. What's
Mm.
changed is that in 1997, they had just introduced drug cocktails, something
Mm.
other than AZT that was basically poison, and it looked like it made people sicker quicker. They had just introduced the antiretrovirals, which I consider a blessing because that's how the regimen that I started on. But I was also taking 18 pills 3 times a day.
Oh, wow.
Now
Wow.
you'll see commercials about 1 pill a day. And they just released a new medication that's an injection. It's the very first one. And that's what's different. The stigma is still there. The discrimination is still there, mainly because of a lack of education and because of a lack of awareness. The difference is there's treatment and there
Mm.
are less severe treatments. In
Okay.
1997, the treatments that were out came with a lot of side effects.
Okay.
And
Mm.
people who are long term survivors, I think I'm considered one too, but there are also people who've been living with this virus for 40 years and I'm not
Mm.
there yet,
Wow.
Okay.
um, who are still experiencing the effects of side effects from the
Mm.
early 90s.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Some
This
of those
day.
things linger.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest difference, the availability and access of to treatment that works. Yeah.
And so when you say drug cocktail, is that a like immune strengthening supplement or is that an antiviral? What is the cocktail
The
consist
cocktail
of?
it's an antiviral regimen, and the way it works is, if you think about viral RNA,
Hmm.
it attaches itself to the RNA in different locations. The
Mm.
receptors, the RNA receptors, it attaches to different locations, and it may take 2 or 3 different drugs to attack in different areas. The single pill options that are available now are literally 3 drugs in one,
Okay.
as opposed to 15 years ago having to take each drug separately. That's why they called it a cocktail.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's an amazing journey, and you've been through a lot since 1997, and God has kept you. That's a blessing.
Yes, and
And
amen.
yeah. And so we stated earlier that December the 1st was World's AIDS Day. So speak to us about the significance of that day and what our community can do to respond to it, and about your work. How does that relate to that?
World AIDS Day is December 1st every year. It's recognized around the world as a day of remembrance for the people who've passed away from HIV and AIDS, and also for the people who are living with HIV and AIDS now, and to bring awareness to our communities so that eventually this thing will come to an end. We're
Mm,
40 years into this epidemic now. It's been 40 years. And so World AIDS Day, it's interesting because as someone who's worked in the field,
mm,
it's on some levels it can almost sound like preaching to the choir, you know,
mm,
because the
mhm,
people who are in the field, the people who are doing it, are the ones who plan the programming, they're the ones who do the webinars, the education sessions, and things like that. And you could just about pick any event anywhere in the country, and the people at the event are the people who are already aware. That's why they're there.
mm,
Mm.
okay.
And so, World AIDS Day, it's on some levels, I believe it does what it was intended to do, but I also think there's much more work to be done in terms of getting people in our communities involved and engaged,
Mhm,
and aware of
mm,
what's actually happening. And that's one of the things that hasn't changed as much over the
okay.
years is if you invite someone out to an AIDS memorial, or if you invite them out to an HIV prevention awareness session, if it has not touched them personally, they're not really interested in going. You can
Mm,
change the name of it and catch them by surprise, but
okay.
that defeats the purpose of trying to fight stigma and
Yeah.
discrimination if we hide it.
Yeah.
One thing that I've found to be absolutely true is that most people don't seek out information about HIV and AIDS in their community until it touches them personally, and then they're on a
Mm,
quest to get more information. But if it doesn't touch them personally, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with them. And so, in that vein, I think we still have a lot of work to do when it
okay.
comes to events like World AIDS Day. March 10th is Women and Girls Day, HIV/AIDS Day.
Mm, okay.
And the people who, I won't say celebrate, but who recognize that day and do things are the people who are already doing it.
Okay. Okay. Makes
So,
sense.
mhm.
So, what are the discussions to help bring more awareness and bring down the stigma, especially in African American and Caribbean and the African diaspora as a whole? Um, what are we doing to help our people? Because we know that we have stigma. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about mental health and going and getting services there. We just don't do those things
Mhm.
until it's the last moment, like you said, when someone touches us. So, what are
Mhm.
some of the ideas floating around, or what has been tried to help our communities, help our people?
I think the first thing that we have to do is to be able to talk about it. To be able to talk about it, because uh, HIV didn't come out of the air. There's some theories about where it came from, but it didn't
Right.
come out of the air. It's spread from person to person. It's spread from person to person. And for the most part, I believe people are inherently good and aren't purposely spreading infections to other people. But if you don't know that you are carrying a virus, you don't know that you are spreading it to someone else. And
Mm,
so the stigma and the discrimination and the taboo that surrounds HIV and AIDS is one of the things that keeps people from being tested.
okay.
Once you get tested and you know your status, then you can take control of it. And that's what helps stop the spread. That's what helps people live longer, because you can't treat what you don't know is there.
Yeah.
And
Right.
unfortunately, for African American communities and Caribbean communities, we tend to only seek medical treatment once things have progressed. Preventative measures are not the first thing, are not our
Mm,
first entree into the medical system. It's usually tertiary level treatment.
yeah.
Things have gotten to the point where medication is needed, and immediately. And
Hmm.
that is also because of the taboo and the stigma. If you're afraid of a result because you don't know what it's going to be, you're not going to go and get a test. And if you do get a test and get a positive test result, but you don't have a support system and people
Mm.
that you can be honest with, people that you can talk to and ask to help walk you through it, it's not as likely that you'll seek treatment or follow through with treatment. A lack of case management and access to medical care is one of the things that keep lower income communities and our
Hmm.
Caribbean communities and our older communities out of treatment. One of the things is that because HIV is a it's a what's the word um, I won't say lifetime illness is another word for it
Okay.
that you live with.
Okay.
Okay.
You live with it. And so
Yeah.
because you live it out for the rest of your life, you have to remain in care.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's a whole
Mm.
other concept that you have to
Wow.
embrace, that you may be on medication for the rest of your life. And you may be able to tell people, yes, I have diabetes and I'll be on insulin for the rest of my life, but it's reversible. It's not as easy to tell people I have HIV, I'll be on medication for the rest of my life. It's not reversible, or at least
Yeah.
not yet.
Right.
So I really feel that having a um, good support system is one of the best things that you can do. And at the root of it is the strength of our relationships. Because you may have family and people around you, but if you don't have a strong enough relationship, those might not be the people that you want to tell your dearest secrets to. In the work that I've done, I've managed support networks for women living with HIV for 16 years. I've been just working with women in HIV and mental health and support networks. And in that time, I've had family members, sisters, both diagnosed positive, never told each other.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I've had women who've only ever discussed their diagnosis with their doctor, not with their family, not with their kids. I've had married women who hadn't told their kids, and it's really sad on some levels because a lot of the people who I've known personally, and I
Hmm.
think this goes for scores of others as well, who are infected, are not because it's not because they had some kind of just real derelict type of behavior. For a lot of women, they just fell in love with the wrong man.
Mm.
There
Yeah.
were men who never went to the doctor, and when they ended up at the doctor, they found out something that he didn't know. Sometimes he did, but not always.
Okay.
And that idea that a lot of people have, that what did you do wrong? What were you doing to contract this disease, is one of the things that keeps people from seeking the help that they need. And so I
Hmm.
think if we start anywhere, it's with being able to talk about it and um, not judging the
Right.
hows and the whats and the whys.
Okay. Yeah. And that was gonna be my next question because you're so right. Many times, sometimes men who get incarcerated, they get violated and they don't want to tell anybody when they come out, and therefore they
Mhm,
impact their families. And so it's hard to talk about. So, given that you're such an expert in this field, what kind of tips can you give for us to have these hard conversations with our loved ones about healthy lifestyles and things like that?
I think it's important to if you don't know how to do it, to get
Mm,
help, to seek
okay.
information, because there are a lot of myths still out there. But to seek information, and there are community organizations and health providers who have family programs. There are not a lot of them, but they do exist. Family
Mm,
programs. Find someone that you trust to go with you, because it's not an easy conversation to have. It's not
yeah.
an easy conversation to have. The delay, I think, is valid in
Mm,
what keeps people from sharing or disclosing their status. But I do think it's a necessary conversation to
mhm.
have. And I'll say what I said before, that at the root of it, I think, is the strength of our relationships. And I feel like I'm able to say that now because I have been on this journey for a long time, and my
Hmm.
family wasn't a part of it for a lot of years.
Okay.
I was a lot of years in
Mm.
before my family became a part of it. And I can honestly say that now it's different than it was 20 years ago.
Okay.
We just did a conference last month, one of the largest conferences in the nation for women living with HIV. We were able to do our first in-person conference post COVID, or we're still in it. But we were able to come together, and one of my sisters volunteered at the
Wow.
conference.
Awesome.
That
Awesome.
wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
That's great.
But she volunteered, and my mom was interested in volunteering,
That's
and
great.
I remember a time when, and I believe she was justified at this time, but she was like, I don't think you should be telling people. I don't think you should be telling people this is between God and the devil, and you don't need to get in it. Don't be telling people. And I understood what she meant, but at the same time, like I said in the beginning, because I didn't have anybody to go to, it was like I got to be somebody for people to go to, because
Yeah.
I've got to be somebody else out there like me. So I
Yeah.
can't just be silent. I have to do something, But I also believe that we are where we are now because of the strength of our relationship that's grown over time.
Okay.
It's grown over time, because another tragic story that I've seen several times is when people have disclosed to their family and sought help from their family and were completely rejected
Wow.
and left without. And I
Mm.
don't encourage that for anyone either. And so what
Yeah.
I like to tell people is know who you can trust. Know who you can trust. And if you don't think they're going to give you the support that you need, you keep what's yours until you
Mm.
find someone you can trust. And sometimes
Hmm.
you just got to take a chance. But if you already know, don't risk it. Don't risk it. It's not worth it. You're worth
Okay.
more than that. Hand it to somebody else and see what they do with it.
That's good. That's good.
That is
I don't know if
good.
I answered your question or not.
No, you did. I
Okay.
appreciate that. Yeah.
You did. And so when you talk about first going to get tested, what is the common advice or what is the sage advice, especially for young women who usually go to the doctor more often? We usually go annually. Is it recommended that if you are sexually active and you know you're sexually active, when you go to that annual appointment, just throw in that HIV testing just as part of the routine
It's
test? Or
absolutely recommended. If you've ever had sex in your life, it's
Yeah.
absolutely recommended to go and
Yeah.
get a test. And what a lot of people don't know is that if you're just going for a general annual or test or what have you, it's not included in the battery of tests that they give you. You have to request an HIV test or
Yeah.
go to a clinic where they offer them on a regular basis.
Hmm.
But absolutely, absolutely. And there are a lot of people who say, "Oh, I don't need an HIV test. I've only slept with one person or what have you." And that's fine. That's great. Then both of you should test negative if that's your story. But
Exactly.
that's not always the case for everybody. So,
True.
particularly for young women, if you're sexually active, yes, go and get a test, because it's better to know. It's better to know than not know. It's
Yeah.
absolutely better to know than not. You might not like it, but what you don't want is to years later suffer consequences because you didn't know. HIV can go undetected for years,
Wow.
and someone living with HIV can not have symptoms for years
Mm.
until the damage
Mm.
is already done. And you don't want to find out in the hospital with pneumonia, wondering where it came from when
Wow.
you thought
Yeah.
you were healthy, but you
Yeah.
haven't been, and you didn't test. It's better to know.
Better to know. And
It's
you're
better
so
to know.
right. And I'll speak up for men because here in the British Virgin Islands, they have an annual men's health fair every year, and they do a battery of different tests, and one is actually an HIV test just to try it out. And so I've been happy married for 26 years, just me, and my wife, no one else. And I said, why not just do it? Just because I've never done it before. And of course, came back negative, but I was trying to show other men, just go ahead and do it. Why not? And so I advocate for that. So I agree with you. Yeah.
you're
Hmm.
taking blood anyway, just add one more test in there for
That's right.
your as an insurance policy.
I want to add, just to make sure I don't leave anything out. If you have sex, and also if you use needles, injection
Good
drug
point.
users.
Good point. Yeah.
Um, HIV can be spread through a dirty needle if you share
Hmm.
needles with anybody. And
Yeah.
you might not even be sharing needles using drugs. I don't know how many people are doing this, but you use needles to inject insulin,
It's true.
and if you
It's
don't
true.
have your supplies, people might be sharing that.
It's true.
So there are different levels of risk involved. And so I think some people may kind of just put it in the back of their minds. I don't want anybody to fool themselves into thinking, oh, no, not me.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's good to do for good measure, though. Good example. I love it.
It is. I try to lead by example here on the Living Well show. So,
So I have a question because when this coronavirus, it's off topic, but it's on topic. When this coronavirus first came out, it was equated to when AIDS first came out because it was like, if you have the virus, oh my God, you have the plague, or don't breathe on me, don't cough on me. Has the has this opened a door to communicate that the how viruses spread, and has it opened a door to do more educating this time of pandemic for HIV? Does that make sense?
It does
Because they're
make
both
sense.
viruses, they both were treated sort of the same way in the beginning. I was wondering if there was an opening to educate more around virus, the spread of viruses, and how to protect yourself.
Mm, I want to say yes, but I'm more inclined to say that there were a lot of comparisons made, but also not scientifically based comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
gotcha.
Yes, that's a virus, and even in the HIV community, there was a lot of talk of we know how to live through viruses. We done this already. Because one of the things that comes with an HIV diagnosis is you learn how it works, and so you know how viruses work. So when they were talking about COVID in the
Mm,
beginning, it was like, okay, yeah, viruses replicate. Y'all was stupid if y'all think this ain't real. You know,
right. Right.
um, as far as opening up more, I guess, lines of communication with awareness and education around HIV. Um, I haven't seen a lot of that. I haven't seen a lot of that. I think the one of the differences is that COVID became very political in the
Mm,
Yeah.
beginning. And
mm,
so there was either an acceptance of the science or a complete denial of it.
mm.
And that didn't necessarily happen with HIV. People were
Okay.
just afraid.
Okay.
And the other difference with the HIV epidemic and COVID is that when HIV first hit the scene, it was mainly gay men who were being infected. And so there was a sense of, oh, well, that's not me, and I don't have to
Mm.
deal with it, which
Mm,
is very different from COVID, which came and hit everybody just about the same, and
mm,
then hit African American communities even worse because our health conditions are often worse with
mm.
underlying illnesses.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there was a little bit in there from the homemade scientists who wanted to research how viruses replicate so they can spread their knowledge to the world. But I don't know that on a grand scale it made much of a difference.
Okay.
Anybody
Gotcha.
watching is welcome to debate on that.
And we welcome good dialogue, good debate, so that's not a problem. Well, as we begin to wrap it up here, we know, as you said earlier, you're with Texas Women University and also at the, I think you saw Grace, um,
Legacy Cares,
Legacy
Legacy
Grace
cares.
Cares. Yes,
Project.
sorry.
Legacy
Yes.
cares.
Yes, yes. And so, how could persons contact you in case they want to get information? Maybe they need some support. How can they get in contact with you, Dr. Reynolds?
You can contact us through. Well, let me see. I'm here on campus, of course. You can always email me at rrunnels1 at tw.edu. But also Legacy. I'll say just a little bit about Legacy Counseling Center. It's now Legacy Cares. We changed the name back in September. Legacy provides counseling, therapy, intensive outpatient substance abuse treatment, housing, and hospice care for people living with HIV and AIDS.
Mm.
The Grace Project is the arm of Legacy that provides a support network for women. And so I'm the coordinator for that program. And one of our major initiatives for 2021 and 2022 is the I Am Red Project. And
Mm.
I Am Red is an anti stigma campaign designed to show women who are living with HIV that they're not alone and that they can still be their fabulous selves and that they don't have to stay in isolation.
Mm.
Because and when you're in isolation, that's the start of the cycle that continues the cycle.
Yeah.
You adopt maladaptive behaviors and you
Mm.
cope with things that aren't healthy for you. Bad relationships, a whole lot of food, drugs, alcohol, sleep,
Mm.
TV. But once you come out of that and get to see people who are living with many of the same challenges and struggles that you have and are thriving in that environment, it helps you to be a better you. And
Mm.
so I would invite anyone, particularly women living with HIV. Men are welcome to contact us as well. Legacy is in the DFW area, but the Grace Project, thanks to COVID, has virtual programming year round. So we meet on Zoom. We do a lot of things over the internet.
Mm.
And the website for the I Am Red campaign is iamredproject.org. If you
Okay.
go to the website, iamredproject.org, you'll see videos from women living with HIV who are shorts as they tell their stories, looking fabulous. And 25 years later, here I am. 40 years
Wow.
later, here I am. One thing we didn't talk about that really stands out, I noticed this the last time I looked at the videos, over half the women living with HIV right now in our country are over the age of 50.
Oh wow.
Over the age of 50. Many of them are long term survivors. About 20% of new infections are older age women. And so it's not just the young person's disease, it's not just the gay person's disease. It affects older women as well. It's a whole lot of church ladies in my group,
Mm.
a
Mm.
whole lot of them that sing, pray, and speak in tongues.
Tell it. Tell it. Tell it.
There's a lot of. So you can visit legacycares.org. You can visit iamredproject.org. You can contact Dr. Albert and Miss Shanique, and they know how to contact me. I am available if anyone has questions or needs some support, because that's what I do. That's why I'm here.
My goodness, Dr. Tanya, you are fabulous. You
Yes.
know, sometimes we don't understand why we have to go through our afflictions in life, but we're put here to serve others. And through your journey, you've been able to help thousands of women make it through this and know that they're not alone. Life isn't over. We didn't talk about all of your achievements since your diagnosis up until now, but you can achieve much, just like Dr. Runnels has. Life doesn't have to end.
That's right.
And God is using you as a testament in the earth for that. And we're so proud of the work that you're doing there and so thankful that
Yes.
you are committed to helping others. Because, like you said, if you don't step out, say something, and be there, who would be there? So,
Mhm.
thank you for the work and the service that you do in this area. And we
Thank you for
thank
having
you.
me.
You're so
Yes. Yes.
welcome.
Yes.
And we thank everyone who has watched on today. We hope that you have truly gathered something that will help you to be better, do better, and live better. And if you know that this episode would be beneficial to someone, whether they're living with HIV that you know of now, or maybe just sharing the information, you never know who is in our community
That's right.
and who is struggling and needs support. Do like and share this episode with others so that we can spread the message, especially to our women and men, that you don't have to do this alone. Life is not over. There are long term survivors, and it can serve a purpose in your life. So we thank you again for joining us on tonight. We look forward to seeing you again next week, right here on the Living Well Show. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.